progress.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon.
So I'm going to go ahead and take a second to take attendance. Then we'll do a couple housekeeping things, and then we'll dive back into talking about food disorders. Okay, few things. Now I have to still combine to get overall averages and whatnot, but the first quiz grades are finally on Blackboard. I just sat at my dining room table on Saturday and made myself grade. So I got that done. Don't freak out if yours is low. I was looking at, I've used similar quizzes the past few years, and I was looking at the averages. And one time it was 5 out of 10, and one time it was 6 out of 10. So this is pretty typical, the first quiz that I get, because people aren't really knowing what to expecting, or what to expect. There we go. So, if you are unhappy with your quiz grade, no, you are probably not the only one in the class. And it just means that we will, you'll get to know what the quizzes expect, and do better as we go on. This is also one of the major reasons I give these lower stakes quizzes in this class, because it's a lot to remember, right? In this class, there's a lot of factoid type things. And so by giving these lower stakes quizzes, right? I mean, what do you have, 800 points for the semester, something like that? And you have, this quiz is only 10 points of that. So by doing 500 points, but still, it's, tiny percentage of your overall grade. So by doing these quizzes, it kind of, again, gets you good question, Marina. Yes. And this is something at least one other person has pointed out to me. I did not go through and update page numbers for SGAs, which I apologize for. Going forward, I can do that. I forgot when I did the SGAs that I just hadn't updated them. So I have like a giant to-do list for the week, and I'm just going to put that on there. To update the page numbers. The big thing for the SGAs, honestly, is that answer those questions that are on them. Again, once I update the page numbers, it'll be a lot more clear, so I apologize. And with the SGAs, I'm really looking for you to parse the information for yourself, right? And so sometimes on the SGAs, there will be like an opinion question. And I'm not asking you to come up with a right answer because there's not one, right? Like the goofy one I asked, like, would you rather have your gray matter or your white matter gone? It's literally just based on what you've been reading. What do you think about it? So thank you. I think, Miranda, you're the second or third person to point that out for me. And I will try to get those updated as we go. No promises that I will do them all at once, but I'll certainly try to make sure each week they are updated correctly. And I'll do the best I can, because I believe someone has my new version of the book, but I think I can access the online version. Basically, the SGAs are to guide you through the chapter, and tell you what to focus on, and then the other part of the SGAs again are to like get you thinking about the concepts, getting you writing down some of these important concepts that we're thinking about. Just let me take a quick look here. I don't want to screen share because I don't want to inadvertently show you everyone's grades. That's a FERPA violation. But I know the last times I've checked that at least like half the class, maybe a third of the class isn't turning in any SGAs. And that's a big problem. Like if you found that you got a really bad grade on this quiz, that might be a big part of it. Okay. Debbie, just be safe. Do what you need to do. And if you need to log off, remember that there will be a recording. So
Oh, Dr. Myers?
Yeah.
So we were supposed to email you with the topics for our Or okay, because I mean I know you're busy. I didn't know if you were supposed to like hear it back, or I mean I'm sure you're probably going to discuss that next, but I just wanted.
Yeah, that's actually next. So
All right.
great segue. Yes, that was my next thing, was the ideas for the project. And here, give me just a sec. I'm gonna pull up the syllabus so we can all look at this together and I'll kind of remember, oh yeah, that's what Dr. Myers was talking about. So let me go ahead and open it real quick here. And then I will screen share. Yeah, this is tough because typically I would have you all just write them down and hand them to me in class. Clearly not feasible right now, but yes, essentially I'm not going to respond to those until I get most people so that I could actually lump the groups together. That's a weird way to discuss it, but group the groups together, I guess. Let me go ahead and screen share here. Alrighty. So here we go. You will give me a list of 3 topics on which you would prefer to do your presentation. They should be ranked in the following order, 1 to 3, most preferred to least preferred. And again, you can use topics from this list, or you can come up with your own. It does not have to be on this list. And in fact, I have updated this list every time I've taught this class because people bring in great new topics that I never would have thought of. So certainly, you know, some really nice topics you could go with here. So yes, what I need from you all today and what I'll try to do, and honestly, as you're listening to me do this update, you can do it now if you haven't done it, but I'll try to leave a couple minutes at the end for you to do it too. Is just email me this list of topics you would prefer to do. Now, if you already know people in the class you're friends with, you know you work well together, you all can submit one together. So designate one person to be your emailer and have that person say, this is for these 3, 4, however many people. I think I've had 2 groups do that already. So that's great. That helps me. If someone else has the exact same topic, I may add them to your group just because you'll probably work well together because you have similar interests. And then what I will do is over the next 2 days, I will put together the drafts of the groups and then give you the next few days to change topics or group. I try not to have more than 6 people in a group just because with what you cover, let me scroll down real quick here to what is covered in the presentation, right? So there are 6 main topic areas you're going to go over during the presentation. So if you have more than 6 people, it's like, what's the 7th person going to talk about? And you might be able to make it work. The last time I taught this class, actually, Dr. Martero was on sabbatical. And so we didn't have another class that met the sort of biopsych requirement being offered. So I taught this class to 32 students at once. And we had some bigger groups and they made it work. But with the class this size, I think we'd be totally fine if people end up in groups of like 3 or 4-ish. Again, but if you have, you know, a group of 5 friends, you think you guys would all work together well, awesome. So again, just to remind you what this presentation project is, so each group is responsible for researching a neuropsychological disorder of their choosing. So we're really trying to avoid ones that we are covering in class. If it's something I would like touch on in class, so we've had people, for example, do NFL and head injury. So like when I'm talking about concussions, I just sort of skim over that. Things along those lines. Or we've had people choose learning disorders and then I just sort of skim that. That's one of the reasons why I want these so early in the semester, is that then I know, like, if your group is going to cover something, I would typically, you know, at least go into a little bit in depth, then I can skim it. So you're going to research the disorder and integrate the information from a variety of sources. And you're going to look at symptoms, which are the subjective problems the individual experiences. So, you know, I'm going to use, it's not a neurological disorder. Oh, at least we don't think so yet. But I'll use COVID as an example here, right? So the symptoms of COVID that are subjective would be things like, I can't smell or taste anything, right? And then the signs are those things other people can observe, they're objective. So like the signs of COVID might be coughing all the way to having to be intubated, right? Or put on a respirator. Then related brain dysfunction. So what area of the brain is being affected here? How would you assess someone who has this disorder? And so this should be neuropsychological assessment. Think about those different tests we talked about at the beginning of the semester in terms of tests for memory, tests for overall intelligence, things along those lines. How this person would be treated, you know, are there therapeutic techniques? Are there techniques they can use to sort of go about their daily life? Are there medications available? And then the quality of life issues. And the quality of life issues are essentially what we talk about on the case study worksheet when we say like the effects on life, on like the individual and their family. So, you know, what's it like for caretakers? What's it like for people actually experiencing this disorders? So again, this is the presentation you're going to have to do. There is no paper associated with this. That being said, if any member of your group is interested in doing the same disorder for your paper for class, that's fine. They don't have to be different. And so then you will do your research, and in a little over a month, you'll meet with me to show me where you're at, and I will help you sort of either whittle down if I feel like you have too much information, or flesh out if I feel like you have not enough. One of the things you're going to do for this is give me a short 10 pages or less reading assignment for the rest of the class. And then you'll do the actual presentation during class time. So again, you are choosing diseases, disorders, topics like these, right? Like lobotomy, if you want to go more historical, if you want to talk about epilepsy or the neuropsychology of evil or Korsakoff syndrome, you know, you have to just tell me those disorders essentially, or topics. So what I need from you today, and again, ideally by the end of class today, is an email, again, from you individually. If you don't have a group, that's okay. It's usually really easy for me to group people together who have similar interests. Or again, if you already know who you want to work with, then I want an email from one of you for all of the group members with the same thing, a list of the 3 topics you're interested in. Questions about that? Hopefully that's fairly straightforward. Thank you, Amanda, for bringing it up, because in one of my other classes, I actually like blew by the deadline for their topic. So I wanted to
yeah, you're welcome.
make sure I covered that. I had it on my mental list, but it helps to have a reminder. Okie dokie. So that is your big thing for today. And again, it won't take you that long, and you get 5 points just for turning it in. So on Thursday, we do have our next quiz. It's covering just the sensory and motor disorders. So what we've covered since quiz 1: agnosia and prosopagnosia, the sensory system, disorders of the motor system, and the motor system. So basically, it's the information from SGA 4 and SGA 5. Okay. The quiz will be on Blackboard, so it'll be the exact same format, multiple choice and matching. The beautiful thing about it being on Blackboard is it will auto score it for us. So huzzah, you'll know your score right away, rather than waiting for me to get my life together and be able to do it. So if we like that, I may even, when I'm able to be back in person, you know, do them on Blackboard, and you can do them on your computer in class or your phone. Okay, good. Yeah, I had the people who weren't able to take it last do it on Blackboard, and Miranda's saying she liked it, so that's good. In some ways, I think it's easier because you just, press a button. I think you probably overthink less. And then the one thing I do want you to notice is that the next quiz after that will be just a week later, and it's just over one topic. And that's just because then we have the midterm on October 7th. So I was updating my morning class, my WGS class about this today. So I should fill you all in too. So here is what is going on in our household. My husband is positive for COVID. My daughter is positive for COVID. I am negative for COVID. Viruses are weird. Obviously that's an advantage because I'm not suffering the effects of it. But it's a disadvantage because I'm not positive. I actually have to wait until, so they have to quarantine for 10 days. They're 10 days from their positive tests is this coming Sunday. I then have to take another test to make sure it's negative 3 to 5 days after that, just to make sure I didn't develop it later, essentially. So that means, in addition to this week being on Zoom, unfortunately, next week's gonna have to be on Zoom. And that's really crummy, especially since I probably don't have it, right? But it is to keep you all safe, to make sure if I did get it late, right, that it doesn't come out for y'all. And yeah, Reed, go ahead.
Hey, just be careful with that because when I came home for Thanksgiving break last year, the first day I got back, my sister tested positive, and then I didn't test positive for like a week or two after that. So like it can be delayed at times, so just be careful.
Thank you. Yeah, and I think that's why my doctor is being so cautious. She's actually I already have a test scheduled for 5 days after their quarantine. So I do have something right now, but it's all nasal. It's like sneezy. And as far as I can tell, that's not COVID, although it also presents differently. But I'm glad I'm not sneezing on you all right now. Let's put it that way. It's probably my allergies. It is that time of the fall. Okay. So any question about logistics of things coming up? So what this does mean is quiz 2 and quiz 3 will be on Blackboard. And then ideally, hoping I actually test negative again, our midterm will actually be in class, and I will be back in class for the day about Alzheimer's. So here, I'll stop sharing for a second so y'all can see me a little bit better. Any questions, concerns, besides updating the SGAs? Again, apologies.
Yeah, I just have one, sorry.
All good, no, good.
So like, I'm not gonna lie, I don't really know anyone in the class. So like, you said you can group people together?
Exactly, yeah. So just turn in your 3 topics individually. And what I find is that there are always people who put in the same topic. So I'll just group y'all together.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, and that's fairly common, especially since we do have sort of a mix of folks who take this class. So, we get like bio majors and psych majors and things like that. So, yeah. Any other questions? Oh, let's see, Miranda. Yeah, never tested positive. Yeah, and I am vaccinated with Moderna. So it is possible, because Moderna is supposedly better against the Delta variant, that I'm just not ever going to test positive. My grad advisor knows someone who is the opposite of us. Like, one person tested positive in their household and no one else ever did. So again, viruses are weird. But again, out of an abundance of caution and to keep you all safe and not make you all have to miss all your other classes or your sporting events or whatever other activity, I'm going to be here for this foreseeable future. Again, I know how to do it. It makes sense, but I wish I could be in the library right now with y'all. Let's put it that way. So thank you for your understanding and your support. I really appreciate it. I'm glad that I made contingency plans in my syllabus. When I made it, I debated and I was like, something's going to happen, and I really thought it would just be like Quinn would get strep or something and I wouldn't want to come in then. Oh, wow. I didn't know they kicked you off to quarantine now. Jeez. Yes, yeah, my husband got Pfizer, and my husband's a first responder at his workplace, so he also got Pfizer like early, like January, February. So he might, that might have worn off a little bit too. So who knows? We're also figuring this out, right? It's a pretty new disease still. And so hopefully we'll get everything under control. And by this time next year, it won't even be an issue. Hopefully, we'll see. I'm still mad. Like, I think I'm over being tired, and I'm just mad that some parent decided it was a good idea to send their child to school when the parent tested positive. Because that's why we all have it. So if you think you have it, don't come to class. Don't go around anybody else. Okie dokie. So today we're going to talk about the movement disorders, and just like, the other disorders we've talked about so far, I think it's best to see what these actually look like, and maybe particularly with the movement disorders because of how unique they are and how they look, right? So I'm gonna, again, make sure that I have the chat down in case anyone needs to ask a question while I'm sharing this. And I'm gonna go ahead and open our links and videos here. So when I was in college and took a comparable class, I watched a great documentary that like you can't get a hold of anymore. And it just had a horrible name. It's called Twitch and Shout, about Tourette's. I remember my professor saying at the time, "Oh, scientists are funny people." He was not thrilled with the idea either, but it was about, people with Tourette's. So I've found a couple different videos. I think we'll probably watch this 23-minute one, but just to go over some of the basics of Tourette's. So it was first described in the year 1885 by a guy named Georges Gilles de la Tourette. So shocking, named after him. And his description is still remarkably accurate. So, the nice thing with movement disorders like this is you can see it, right? Even if you don't have brain imaging or fancy things, it's pretty easy. I was trying to just close that tab. It's pretty easy to see what this looks like. So you see multiple tics, and the tics can be facial, on your arms, they can be in your torso, and then there's inarticulate cries that emerge with that. It might just be like a ah that they make, and then they start having articulate words as part of their tics. And so the common one that we hear is people swearing, but not everyone who has it will actually swear. And that is called, if they're using obscene or lewd speech here, and they can't control it, right? Remember that. It is coprolalia, and I'm throwing that in the chat for y'all. Then the other thing they can have is echolalia, where they just repeat what other people say. And so age of onset is usually in childhood, so between the ages of 2 and 15. And it's not associated with any other psychological disorder. So some people will be like, oh, they have to be crazy. Nope, it's its own thing, right? In terms of the brain, it's the subcortical region, in particular, the basal ganglia. And that shouldn't surprise us now, right? The basal ganglia are going to pop up for pretty much any of these movement-based disorders. And treatments, you can use medications that are anti-dopamigenic, and basically it just means it slows down your brain's production of dopamine. And then also drugs that directly affect norepinephrine. So one of the things that's implicated in this disorder is an excess of dopamine or an excess of norepinephrine in your brain. So if you were to do neuropsychological tests on them, they have abnormalities in a couple areas. So they include drawing, remembering, complex figures, like the ray, that really complicated one, right, that we looked at in class. And then difficulty remembering locations of, and these could even be things in their everyday life. Okay. So let's go ahead and watch this 23-minute video, just because, again, it helps to get a feel for what these disorders are like. So I'm going to go ahead and throw on the captions.
Biscuit. Biscuit. Biscuit.
Why the word biscuit?
Oh gosh, I wish I knew. Biscuit. Happy birthday!
They want to be heard.
Sorry, guy.
It's like a sneeze. Once you let it out, it just erupts.
Mind your please.
Tourette's.
Biscuit. Biscuit. Don't say biscuit. 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 Biscuit.
How does it feel physically?
Tiring.
Now they're helping kids.
My mission is to change the world. Biscuit one tick at a time.
And music is helping them. The fascinating and, yes, confronting world of Tourette's. It can be as mild as an involuntary cough, a facial tic, even the way you sneeze. But at its most severe, it causes sudden and surprising movements and sounds, including foul language. It's embarrassing and completely uncontrollable, which is why the three brave people you're about to meet want to be heard. They want you to know what it's like. And a warning, they don't mean to offend, but some of their language may offend some viewers. Here's Ronnie Sadler. So tell me what your Tourette's symptoms are now. What do you feel? What happens to you?
I often describe for everyone else who doesn't know Tourette's as it's like a sneeze that wants to come out and is going to come out, and you might as well just let it out. I also just describe it as, like, say, having a fizzy can and you're shaking it, and wanking. You have a fizzy can and you're shaking it, and it's just better to just let it go.
Oh, faggots.
Buggeries. Once you let it out, it just erupts. And I think that's where I am with my Tourette's. To the Batmobile. Kick him in the nuts. Push him.
We first met Ruth Ojadi in East London.
Samantha f***ing dingo. All right, last one out's a wanker.
On the Underground, taking the train into town.
This is a Piccadilly line service to Heathrow terminals 1, 2, 3.
For her fellow passengers, what she says is confronting.
Can we kill him yet? When can we kill him?
For her, it's uncontrollable.
Cellulite.
Winkers!
Further north in a Liverpool pub, Luke Montague is about to order a pint. It might take a while.
Bollocks! Bollocks! Winkers!
How does it feel physically?
Tiring.
Biscuits.
Back in London, Jess Tom is being made up for a performance that will
Biscuit. How? Biscuit.
take the biscuit.
How? Biscuit. 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 Biscuit.
The word biscuit. Why the word biscuit?
Oh gosh, I wish I knew. Biscuit, why certain words, biscuit, become ticks. How is a complete mystery to me. Biscuit. And as well as being sometimes like a worry, like you worry what you're going to, what the next tick will be. Biscuit, it also can be quite a delight. How? Biscuit. Sand. Help. I'm stuck down a well.
How do you go dating?
Winkers! I did speed dating once. That was interesting. It's the only time I could offend women in bulk, to be honest.
Luke, Jess and Ruth have Tourette's,
Oh, he's cheating on you. Oh, he's cheating on you.
as do 1% of the population, 220,000 Australians. 10% of them have the form that compels them to swear, but for most it's as mild as a facial tic or even throat clearing. It's largely hereditary and begins in early childhood.
Action, alligator snap. Help! I'm stuck in a well. And relax.
Jess was a small child when her Tourette's developed.
When I was about 6, Biscuit, that's the sort of first age that I can, Biscuit, feel like I can date it. Biscuit, and I made a sort of squeaky noise with my mouth. And I remember knowing that I couldn't just stop.
At first, her behaviour, her tics, seemed little to worry about.
Man, Biscuit, they were much less noticeable. When I was younger than they are now, less noticeable to other people. Biscuit, the sensation hasn't actually changed. Biscuit, that much from me. Biscuit, my muscles will contract and move into uncomfortable positions. Biscuit, and that can be painful. Biscuit, the sensation is, Biscuit, really overwhelming. Biscuit, it's like a constant surge of, Biscuit, of sort of discomfort, and like it's impossible, Biscuit, to be still. Sometimes it feels like there's sort of itching powder in your blood, and no, Biscuit, there's no part of your, there's no way of being still or comfortable. Biscuit, San.
How are you feeling right now in your body? Like at this moment, does that hurt? Is it annoying?
No, Biscuit, it's not annoying. Biscuit, it's Biscuit, and I can't. It's difficult to describe something that's always been Biscuit, part of my part of my life. Biscuit.
What does it feel like when your body is doing these things? Do you feel like you have any control over it, or are your arms just doing exactly what they want with...
What they want. My arms are doing exactly what they want, and for me, it's best to do that. I feel sometimes like I often describe my Tourette's maybe as like a 2-year-old trying to escape, and like all small children, it's best just to let them get it out of their system.
Ruth is a 26-year-old singer.
Bomb.
She has little control over what she says.
Oh, wankers.
It's involuntary.
All hail Lucifer.
But what she says can
Lucifer. Wankers.
and does offend people around her.
Cellulite.
For reasons that mystify her, her condition is intensified when she's out in public.
Penis.
She accepts it now, but for many years struggled to understand and to cope. Ruth now limits her day-to-day activities for fear of embarrassing herself and others.
Knock, knock. Who's there? Lucifer. Hi, Lucifer.
Let's take Lucifer shopping. When was the last time you came clothes shopping?
In an actual shop. Maybe 2-3 years ago.
Do you ever sit there and wonder why on earth this had to happen to you?
When I first got diagnosed, every day, every minute, I used to think, why me? I'm quiet, I do my work. No one else seems to have it in the family. Why has it chosen me? Painters.
Tell me about some of the more negative experiences you've had.
I remember going to a restaurant, actually, when I'd just been diagnosed, and I didn't want to go out, but my sister persuaded me to go out, and, pirates. Oh, my God, it's a pirate. And, you know, I just wanted to get back into the car and go home. And she was taking ages. And I said, oh, God, what's going on? She's heading out. And apparently one of the guys had asked, you know, what's up with her? And she'd stopped to explain that I had Tourette's syndrome. And the guy said, oh, it's such a shame. Oh. And I just thought, I really don't want that to follow me, for someone to sort of like just say, oh, that's such a shame, or yeah, oh, she would have been okay, or she would have been fine if she didn't have that. I think that for me is worse than someone just making a nasty comment, because when someone pities you, it's almost compassion, but in the wrong way, and that's often harder to talk around or to make someone understand that, no, actually I'm okay and I'm actually living my life to the fullest, and it's just humanity but in a different way.
Taking a stroll. Luke will be with us in a tick. He wouldn't mind that line. He's turned his condition into his livelihood. Luke's a comedian. We met him warming up.
My name's Luke. It's great to be here performing at the Tell for One Person in front of a mirror. You know, as you can tell, I've got Tourette's and things you can't do with Tourette's, which is bingo calling. Yes, my name's Luke. I suffer from Tourette's.
Later that night,
Wow! Shaggy. Never watched Scooby-Doo. That's the f***ing way to sing.
exposing the lighter side of his Tourette's for an audience is one thing, but being the centre of attention in daily life is another. The next day, we visited Liverpool's museum and aquarium.
Off. Off.
Wow, look at the fishies, look.
I find it physically tiring because you're trying to like hold it in because you don't want to release the tick, but you've got to release it eventually, and you just feel physically drained, like you've just run a marathon. You're tensing everything up, and then when you've released it, it's that relief, and you just feel physically drained.
Does that hurt? Do you ever hurt yourself?
No.
Granny, Scott and runs.
So what else do you suffer from? You do have coprolalia, so you do have the swearing part, but you have so many other...
Yeah, I have echopraxia, so that's the mimicking of people's gestures. I have echolalia, repeating back people's sounds, so I've become Australian.
Oh, this is Ace. This is Bonza. Really is Bonza.
You have today.
Dingo. Dingo.
Great big dingo.
I've had a lot of wear and tear on my joints as well. For the minute, I've escaped like knee surgery, but I really think I'm going to have it on my shoulder. I've had Botox injections on my shoulder as well to help reduce some of the movement. That's not really worked.
I have much less control than I used to, Biscuit, and frequently find
Jess, who's a childcare worker, has also suffered physically. She's sometimes forced into a wheelchair, so violent are her tics. Her Tourette's can make her a danger to herself.
It's funny, people respond differently, I think. Biscuit, when I'm using the wheelchair.
I wear gloves, Biscuit, that protect my knuckles from where I bang my chest all the time, and padded gloves that protect my chest, Biscuit. Actually, my chest, Biscuit, people often worry about my chest, Biscuit. It stopped bruising years ago, Biscuit, and doesn't bother anymore. But what does happen is that my knuckles, if I don't wear the gloves, Biscuit, my knuckles sort of erode and crack, and that can be very painful, Biscuit, from the repetitive rubbing of the sand, Biscuit. How? Things like plastic cutlery and plates, Biscuit, and the Biscuit lid cups with lids. All of those things just take, Biscuit, a lot of the unpredictability and challenge out of situations, Biscuit, and keep me drier.
It's easy to laugh, but for Jess, things can get very serious. Her tics become so intense, they appear like a seizure. Jess asked that we show this.
Have you ever felt embarrassed?
No, I felt angry a lot of the time at other people's reactions, and I think that that's something that I feel much. I don't know. I think I feel that more than you do. Is that when people react badly, I get quite grumpy about it because I sort of, you know, she's my sister, and I think that people pointing and laughing in the street is really it's not okay. I've told a few people that.
Have you?
Yeah.
What did you say?
She's quite fierce.
I said it's, you know, like it's okay if you want to come up and talk to us, but pointing and laughing is not cool.
Biscuit.
Oh, good eye. When I sang, there was just some sort of release, and I didn't tick doing it. There's so much more to the syndrome than people actually understand.
For Alan Bond, the Wall Street Killers, and the Underworld's Louis Moran.
I was too short.
His name.
Mr. Fraser.
This program brought to you by the stunning I-40 range.
Biscuit, 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 biscuit.
Dingoes.
Tourette syndrome isn't one thing. It's a bunch of things, maybe 50 things, with 50 different causes, all sort of leading to this roughly the same sort of place.
Tourette's is little understood. It's not even known what triggers it. But neuropsychiatrists like Hugh Rickards believe the secret may lie in the centre of the brain.
Biscuit.
We're pretty sure that a bit of the brain called the basal ganglia is the bit that's different. And one of the things that the basal ganglia does is that it filters drives and ideas and thoughts. And really what's happening in Tourette is that you've got a breakdown of that filtering process. So you're getting, if you like, non-salient thoughts or very mildly salient thoughts coming right to the front of your attention saying, do me now, say me now. And that's what's really happening, I think, in the brain of people with Tourette's.
Did you used to try and suppress it?
Oh, I did a pretty good job of suppressing. However, in the evenings when I used to go home, I was just exhausted, shattered, ratty for it, and it just came out even more than what it would have. It's a constant thing that you sometimes have to, you know, put your warrior suit on to be able to do anything with.
It wears you down.
Yeah, emotionally, it has been very crippling. I think that's the biggest part of my syndrome that I deal with. It's the anxiety and the depression, to be quite honest.
Yeah. What's the worst part? What causes the anxiety and depression to exacerbate?
Just knowing sometimes that this is it. This is the syndrome. It's not going to get cured. Oh, good eye. Time for home and away. Okay, wicked. Shall we roll with this?
Yeah,
I think I want to talk.
Perhaps most remarkable about Ruth's condition is that when she sings,
Shut up.
it leaves her alone. Music is her escape.
To kill a mockingbird is to silence the sound that seduces you. I'd always grown up with music. I played piano from when I was about like 5 or 6 at my mum's, and realising that when I sang, there was just some sort of release, and I didn't tick doing it. Fire in your soul to know you're still. Just to be able to get like mundane tasks done, like cleaning the bath out, I realised that if I sang, I would just stop and I could get the whole bath cleaned in like 5 minutes instead of 20 minutes, and without knocking everything over. So I was just like, right, I'll do this. And I can.
On a mission to demystify Tourette's, to celebrate its humour and creativity, Jess has set up a website which gets thousands of hits every day. And when she's not doing that, she, Ruth and Luke help raise awareness in the wider community and offer support to fellow sufferers like 11-year-old Pierce.
What I noticed with Tourette's syndrome is that any other condition, any other disability, people feel empathy towards that person. Whereas when you have Tourette's syndrome, it's a joke, it's a laugh. You can take it. There's something to be said for being able to walk around and F and Jeff, as it were.
Happy birthday. Happy birthday, Jess. Happy birthday, thank you. How are you doing? Oh, I'm cool. Biscuit, it's not my birthday.
You're going to enjoy that, since you know, it's a f***ing book. No. But there's so much more to the syndrome than people actually understand, you know.
If they found a cure for Tourette's, would you want to be cured?
No, I wouldn't want to be cured because it's, you know, it's a part of me. It's who I am. You know, I don't see why I should change, but just because other people have a problem with it, and it would feel like something was missing.
Yeah, yeah. You wouldn't want it to go away. You wouldn't want it to be less of a hassle.
You slag. No, you know, I'm enjoying being myself.
I created a superhero character called Tourette's Hero Biscuit.
I'm Tourette's Hero Biscuit. I am the world's first Biscuit, fully fledged Tourette's Hero Biscuit superhero Biscuit.
And what are Tourette's Hero's superpowers?
Being able to randomly collide words together and make people laugh.
There's been a crisis. Imagination levels have plummeted, Biscuit, and we need your help, Biscuit.
I'm not looking for anybody to feel sorry for me, Biscuit, or want to try and fix me, Biscuit. I want some people to understand, to think about it, Biscuit, to celebrate the interesting bits about Tourette's, and Biscuit, if they know somebody with Tourette's or meet me, Biscuit, to offer support and friendship and empathy. Biscuit.
So can anybody think of a really good character?
A dingo. Stole my baby.
Biscuit, and my mission is to change the world. Biscuit, one tick at a time.
Can't you see how my heart yearns to me?
behave.
Just love her. I think music teachers look at the end of that one. It's like, okay, this is what we're working with. So what were your reactions to watching that?
I appreciate how the I appreciate how they often kind of see the humor in their own disorders. Like at the very end, she finishes singing, immediately swears, and then just kind of has like a smile, like whoops. And that's, you know, like you have to have a certain amount of, you know, an ability to laugh at yourself before you start crying. And I also think the question about whether or not they want a cure, I think is, I mean, it's different for everybody. You know, it makes you wonder if they had asked that same question of the other girl, the biscuit girl, I can't remember her name and I feel terrible. But if they had asked that question of her, that perhaps, you know, she might have a different answer because it's so, it makes it so that she can't go about her day. Like it's so debilitating for her. And it kind of begs the question, you know, like some deaf people want to be able to hear. They want cochlear implants. And some deaf people prefer to not be able to hear, and that's okay. And if we had like a cure, like who would want it and why?
Yeah, excellent point, Miranda. A couple of people putting stuff in the chat, so I'm going to read that. Sasha, I think you're spot on that having a sense of community, knowing other people with the disorder can help a lot. There's a camp Twitch and Shout. There's a video about that I'm not going to show, but you can feel free to watch it later. It's linked here on Blackboard for kids with this disorder or this disease, so they can all just go together and stick together, right? The Twitch and Shout documentary that I watched in undergrad talked about a convention where they all go, and again have that support. And Will's saying she taught some lessons to a girl with Tourette's. Her tics weren't as frequent. Yeah, I think that it does tend to worsen with age sometimes, but also just some people don't have it as badly as others. Yeah, Emily, I think that you and I think Debbie has said something similar to some of the other videos, right? The idea that it's hard to watch some of these things. But the reason I'm having you all watch these is so that you can see, you know, again, A, what it's like to live with this disorder, and B, you know, I think that it would surprise many of us, right? That the guy who had Tourette's was like, I wouldn't want to change it. This is who I am. Yeah, I was trying to think, and I couldn't even think of what to Google, but there was a great independent movie that came out last year, Miranda, that relates to what you were talking about with the deaf community. It's like The Sound of Metal, and it's about a metal band drummer who loses his hearing and sort of him navigating things. It's very good. As you can imagine, the sound capture is amazing. They kind of like make it so that you experience what he would experience at some times. So highly recommended. I know it was streaming when we watched it, but I don't remember which service. But yeah, I think that these are all really good points. Yeah, if you can find a community of other people who are experiencing what you're experiencing, right, then that can help quite a bit. That's great. Oh, Trey, I didn't know that there are social media influencers that have Tourette's that have been educating people on the condition. That is fantastic. I know that in general, social media has been a way for people to share things about things they experience and demystify. So that's fantastic that there are influencers with Tourette's. That makes me really happy. And
yeah, sorry.
If anyone has good links, email them to me and I'll throw them on Blackboard.
Yeah, also, you know, being a recreational therapy major, just seeing the joy that, I don't know the names, but the African-American girl, just the joy that she had when she would like be singing, and like that she could totally, you know, just go ahead and start singing and not worry about her condition and just, you know, have that sense of pleasure. And that's what I like to see, especially as a rec therapy major, you know.
Yeah, I think that that's so true, Amanda.
They're finding what they're passionate about, regardless. I mean, even though they have a disability, they're finding their abilities and what they in their disability.
Yeah. I think that's fantastic. Yeah. Really interesting comment from Miranda too about, you know, how people who have differing abilities sort of imagine the world, which is interesting. All right, so next we're going to transition to talking about Huntington's disease, which is another movement disorder. Another one named after the guy who first described it. This was George Huntington. He was 8 years old when he first saw two women with Huntington's. He described them as tall and thin, twisting and grimacing. But he became interested partially because of this and becoming a doctor. And he did so. And he wrote this description when he was only 22 years old. So something for us to all inspire to, right? And both his dad and his grandpa were doctors too. So nice. Thanks for sharing the links for the Tourette's creators. I'll look at them later. That's fantastic. All right. So what role did Tourette's play in American history? Who remembers from the reading? Okay, I think like two of you turn listen, so I'll fill you in. So there was a place in England in 1630 called the Village of Burns, where whole families were branded and tried as witches, who had Huntington's, that they thought people who had Huntington's disease were witches. So they actually sailed to America with John Winthrop. And then, of course, we were not great to people who were unique here either. So they were branded as witches here, and some of them were hanged as well. And basically, the genetic bases for Tourette's were established by tracing family histories backwards, all the way back to Winthrop's passengers. So think of it as a scientific ancestry.com, basically. So at that time, right, that was seen as criminal, as you were possessed, right? And today I don't think we have too many analogous things, although certainly we assume anyone with antisocial personality disorder is going to get in some sort of legal trouble, right? And then we also have largely legislated rather than try to help people with, say, addictions, right? Substance use disorders. So, you know, I think that that's a big problem for things like the opioid crisis and things along those lines. So again, this is a genetic disorder, and it includes intellectual deterioration and abnormal movements. And the movements entail all the limbs, and they're irregular. There's no real pattern to them. They tend to affect the head, the face, the trunk of the body, which is like your torso, and your limbs. And they were first described, and why this disease is referred to as Huntington's chorea sometimes, as being like dance-like, because sometimes they're sort of more graceful, right? And chorea sort of translates to dance. It begins as a reduction of activity and restriction of interests, and then those movements begin about a year after that. Onset is typically later than Tourette's, so age 30 to 50, very rare to have it before age 20. And unfortunately, this is a disease like Alzheimer's that we'll learn about in a few weeks, that does affect you to the point that eventually it causes your mortality. So you also see personality changes, cognitive impairments, and there can be anxiety, depression, mania, and even psychosis. So this can be a very crippling and isolating disease as well. brain abnormalities, atrophy of the basal ganglia. So that means that the basal ganglia shrink, essentially, they lose mass. There's shrinkage and thinning throughout the cortex as well. And there's imbalance among basically all the neurotransmitter systems, in particular, death of GABA and ACH neurons in the basal ganglia. So if you were to give them neuropsychological assessments, they would perform poorly on memory and frontal lobe tests. So I think I'm going to pause there so that we can watch this video about Huntington's disease. It's not as long.
A debilitating disease is a trial not just for those who contract it, but for everyone else in the family as well. From John Blackstone now, an unblinking look at a particularly cruel disease and the full gamut of human reactions that its onslaught can provoke.
If you have heard of Huntington's disease at all, it may be because of Carol Carr, the 63-year-old mother who killed her 2 bedridden sons in a Georgia nursing home. She shot them, she says, to stop their suffering with the disease. As Carr awaits trial for murder, her tragedy has given new urgency to the mission of Chris Furby.
When I heard about the case, I kept saying to myself, you know, I want to do something.
He is caretaker of a municipal park in Marin County, California. But his real work these days is to make others understand Huntington's, an incurable inherited disease that haunts the families of some 250,000 Americans. Huntington's is the disease that cut short the life of folk singer and songwriter Woody Guthrie, who died in 1967. Chris is convinced that Carol Carr was led to her desperate act because the world around her doesn't comprehend the unique torment of Huntington's.
She would go in day after day and see her sons, you know, deteriorating to a point where, you know, they can't do anything.
To help others understand, Chris is now reliving his mother's deterioration with Huntington's, a vibrant woman whose passion was painting. Chris is creating a documentary from hundreds of hours of videotape.
I allowed myself to film my mom in that vulnerable state that she was in.
As the defective Huntington's gene disrupted her brain, Chris's mother, Rosemary, was seized by the uncontrollable movements that mark the disease.
Today's Mother's Day, and it hasn't started out to be a happy one.
Chris shot the video in 1995, largely as a personal diary.
I remember when I first saw my mom in 5 years. I couldn't believe it, because my memories of my mom she's so beautiful, and that's what I want to keep in my head.
The movements are sometimes called Huntington's dance, and that's what Chris calls his documentary. It begins with his return home to West Virginia.
Ran away from her and trying to run away from Huntington's disease too, but you can't run away from it because it stares me in the face every day.
Children have a 50-50 chance of inheriting the disease from their parent.
I can't help but think, is that my fate? Is that what lies ahead for me?
Once, there was no way of knowing who had inherited the defective gene until symptoms started. But now, a genetic test can reveal the future.
One of these days, I'm going to have those movements.
Which is how Chris found out that he too has the Huntington's gene. Symptoms usually begin about age 40. You are now?
I'm 36 now. I get a little older. I'm not really too thrilled about having birthdays.
Now, Chris is in a race against his genetic destiny. But he's not alone. In a support group with others who have Huntington's in their family, the challenges of facing the future are shared. For some in the group, Paul, Susie, and Fred, the first disturbing symptoms have already begun. Martina has just tested positive for Huntington's. Susan doesn't have the disease, but her husband did, and both her daughter and son now have Huntington's.
This is my family, 1194.
7 years ago.
7 years ago. This is the same group last Christmas.
Huntington's cuts a swath
So you
through
can
any
see-
family with the
Now,
disease.
so just as what 7 years have done,
Martina says taking the genetic test for Huntington's is a watershed decision for anyone at risk.
You can't be tested and become paralyzed. You have to use it in a way where you're gonna appreciate things more.
Robert, though, sees nothing to gain by being tested and perhaps plenty to lose.
If I get tested, my anything I do medical goes right back to my job.
Barbara sees the future presenting difficult choices of life and death.
My friends with Huntington's and myself are frequently wondering what we're going to do. I watched my mother deteriorate, and I think dying consciously, making a conscious choice to choose when you're going to die so you don't end up in a mental institution like she did, is appropriate for somebody going through something like this. But, so it's a tough call.
Chris Furby says his mother sometimes talked of suicide. As the disease progressed, the lines in her paintings began to blur. Still, she struggled to continue her art, to remain independent. She died confined to a nursing home 2 years ago. Most in the support group have watched their own parents go through it and know all too well what could lie ahead for them. In Susie's family, the toll keeps rising.
My brother died a year and a half ago, and my other brother's dying, and I'm starting to feel all my, my symptoms come up and stuff. I'm dropping things, coffee, and I'm banging into stuff. And just
But even in Susie's family, hope survives. Beside her at the support group is her niece, Jocelyn. She's pregnant.
Yeah, 3.5 months. Actually, it was a hard decision because obviously I have Huntington's. My whole family pretty much has it. So
Jocelyn has decided not to test her baby for Huntington's. She is confident in her child's lifetime research will find answers.
I figure, baby has 40 years. That's a really long time. Bet on science and time. So there's got to be something positive in it.
I get scared from time to time. I'm not 100% okay with this disease, but I feel that I'm fairly okay with the fact that I will get sick one of these days, and that I'm not going to let this thing, drag me down.
In his videotapes, Chris finds new strength as he works to tell the story of Huntington's.
I want people, not only the general public, but healthcare workers, doctors, nurses, nursing homes. I want them all to know what Huntington's disease is and to realize that the person that they're dealing with is actually a human being.
His goal is to show that in each tortured body, a real person remains.
Okay, so again, depressing, right? Fully acknowledge that. And you can see this, like Alzheimer's, is known to be genetic, right? Particularly certain strands of Alzheimer's or strains of Alzheimer's are genetic. And so, not wanting to get her child tested, this is a decision parents have to make all the time for things. So for example, when I was pregnant, I chose to decline some tests because it was like, well, are we going to raise this child no matter what? Yeah. And they do the common ones. They check for like trisomies and things like that. But yeah, it is sort of like, as a parent, you have to decide. Do you get your child tested? Do you not have kids, right? Or do you hope that by the time your kids are old enough to have it, there might be some scientific advancements, right? So that is...
Sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
I personally think that if there were any sort of early interventions that she was specifically ignoring, by not testing her child, like if she tested her child and if it came back that she was positive for the Huntington's gene and there was something that could immediately be done and she chose not to get her child tested, that would be like an ethically gray decision in my opinion. However, since there's really no early interventions at this moment in time, there's nothing that science knows to prevent Huntington's when you know it's going to happen in children. I think that as long as she allows her child to understand the risks and know what she may be exposed to and have to deal with later in life, then her child can make that decision for herself later.
Yeah, this is, an ethical quandary, just like Miranda, I really like that you put in about Kevorkian. So I'm from Michigan. When I was growing up, Jack Kevorkian was doing his Dr. Death thing. And so, as you can imagine, his trial and whatnot were very publicized. If you're not familiar with the Kevorkian case, he was someone who believed in what's now termed death with dignity, essentially assisted death by suicide. And because nowhere would let him practice doing this because it was illegal, he actually had a van that he would go to people's houses and help them quietly end their lives. And they were people with diseases like this. And this is still controversial today. So, for example, those of you who have taken psychogender or other classes may have heard of Sandra Bem. She was one of the authors of the Bem sexual scale. She developed Alzheimer's, and she made a pact with her family that essentially said, when I get to a certain point and we make sure it's still my choice, I'm going to take an overdose of morphine. And that's what she did. And some people in the psychological community sort of applauded her for that, and others said that it, sort of erases disability, things along those lines. I mean, I personally think it's an individual choice, and if it's legal in your state, right? That's something you and your family decide together. The weirdest analogy I have is that we'll euthanize our pets, right, to help stop their suffering. So, yeah, it is sort of difficult. All right, the last thing we're going to watch a really quick video about is mirror neurons, which your chapter talks about briefly.
Let me take you back to the early 1990s. Sleepy little laboratory in Parma, Italy, and scientists had a MRI brain scanning machine on a macaque monkey as the macaque monkey was trying to open up a nut. They wanted to see how the neurons would light up. So the monkey's trying to open up the nut, the neurons light up, and just by serendipity, and this is how science sometimes happens, a human being walked into the laboratory. I don't know if it was by mistake, and he was hungry. He saw the nuts and opened up one of the nuts and tried to crack it open. The macaque monkey was totally shocked because who was this invader in his laboratory? And he didn't move. He just gazed at this human trying to open up the nut, just like he had done a few seconds earlier. And then the scientist looked on the MRI brain scanner. The same exact neurons were lighting up when he observed the human being opening the nut as when the monkey opened the nut. And the scientists had not a clue as to what this was. They thought the MRI machine had broken. They then began to put MRI brain scanning machines on other primates, especially chimpanzees with our big neocortex. Then they went to humans. And what they found over and over again is something called mirror neurons. And that is that we are apparently soft-wired, some of the primates, all humans. We suspect elephants. We're not sure about dolphins and dogs. We've just begun. But all humans are soft-wired with mirror neurons so that if I'm observing you, your anger, your frustration, your sense of rejection, your joy, whatever it is, and I can feel what you're doing, the same neurons will light up in me as if I'm having that experience myself. Now, this isn't all that unusual. We know if a spider goes up someone's arm and I'm observing it going up your arm, I'm going to get a creepy feeling. We take this for granted, but we are actually soft-wired to actually experience another's plight as if we are experiencing ourselves. But mirror neurons are just the beginning of a whole range of research going on in neuropsychology and brain research and in child development that suggests that we are actually soft-wired, not for aggression and violence and self-interest and utilitarianism, that we are actually soft-wired for sociability, attachment, as John Bowlby might have said, affection, companionship, and that the first drive is the drive to actually belong. It's an empathic drive.
So a couple things from that. One is that it means that this is partially how we learn to do things, right? These mirror neurons allow us to imitate and understand each other's actions. So it's about copying things, but more than that, and I really like that video because it gets to the heart of that pretty quickly, is it's about empathy, right? It's about being able to understand what other people are going through and almost experience it yourself. And there's a lot to be learned from this, right? Again, you can see some of the animals, they were also looking at it, the other intelligent animals, right? Dogs, elephants, dolphins. These are all pack animals, just like humans, right? So humans benefit from having this social advantage because we are people who live in a community, right? Dolphins live in pods. Dogs, you know, their ancestors, wolves live in packs, right? Elephants live in herds. So there is a real advantage to being able to learn pretty quickly appropriate social behaviors, right? But then also to be able to understand why another being, be that a human, a dog, a dolphin, what have you, right? Chimpanzee. Bonobo chimps, by the way, are our closest genetic relatives. We share 98% of our DNA with bonobos. That by understanding why that other being is doing what they're doing, it gives us that empathy. This is sometimes called theory of mind as well. It's something that people with certain disorders struggle with. So for example, people with schizophrenia struggle with this. Some people, not all, but some people on the autism spectrum struggle with this. They think there's likely, you know, something going on in the brain in this area, which in humans tends to be in the left hemisphere. So definitely something interesting to think about. And again, like how our brain does really cool things, right? They've since done a lot of really cool brain scan studies and found out that this idea of our brain lighting up like we are doing something when we're not is fairly common. So it's actually like, if you think about eating something, right, the same areas of your brain will light up as if you're actually eating something, for example. Alrighty, please email me with any questions you have for the exam. Make sure you do the SGA, or the quiz, sorry, not to freak you out. Make sure you do the SGAs. Again, there's only 2 for these chapters. And those will help you study so much. I will go in this week and try to update the page numbers on the SGAs. I'll try to start with 4 and 5 for those of you who haven't done them yet. And yeah, I'll stick around for a minute if anyone has any questions. If not, take care of yourselves and I'll see you for the quiz on Thursday.